We'll see. All right. Hi, everybody. If you're watching the replay, I know we're not on yet, but thanks for rewatching if you are. Um, I am pretty excited. Pretty excited for this one. As much as I'm like doing it tonight might have been a mistake. The actual like conversation I'm very excited for. So hopefully it goes smoother than I'm anticipating. um, yeah, if you are here and you're like, what is wrong with Heather? Heather's just tired. So either like correct me or ignore me or something, but don't hold it against me. So pretty excited because I've never had you guys on my channel before. So if you want to go ahead and introduce yourselves, the platform that you prefer people to follow you on, and what you like to talk about, or maybe which types of books you like to read, that would be great because I don't think most people are going to know both of you. I think there's going to be some overlap, but we'll see. Jackie, you can go first.
Okay. I'm Jacqueline. I previously was present on BookTube, but boy, I get really perfectionist about editing, and I was like, I don't have the time for this. So right now I'm primarily on TikTok because it takes less of my attention span. But I'm on the same page on all platforms.
But with a 9 for a lot of them, right?
Yes.
I'm always
With
searching you, and it's like that showing
yes.
up. 9 instead of the G.
Instead of a
So
G.
if you're searching for me.
We're supposed to talk about something else about us, or just where we're at?
What type of books do you
Oh, what type of books?
typically?
Right now I'm reading almost exclusively romance, like subgenres within that. But uh I'm just like putting off when I'm gonna reread the Percy Jackson series because I've like in all the hype with the show
Yeah.
with, and like there was stuff that came out at like D23, so
Yeah.
I is it my me?
Go ahead.
Great. Okay. I'm Hannah Blackwell, and I have a YouTube channel and an Instagram. Newbie on both. And I read, I would say 50% romance, and then the rest is fantasy and thrillers and horrors. But I would say on average, like 40 to 50% romance. It's probably my biggest genre that I read of all of them, but I read a lot of different stuff.
And we can tell you like vampires from your mug. So we know
oh,
you're
This was
you're
so
normal.
cute.
oh, I
And
love
then,
that.
I don't know if it was, I think it was new this year.
oh yeah.
Maybe.
Mm,
I didn't see it until this year
cute.
from Ray Dunn.
Well, I know I've been following Jackie for a while, and I'm obsessed with your TikToks. Like
Thank you.
and then Hannah, I actually just met because we were in Bookopoly-thon sprints just in the live chat, and she was like indie romances, and I was like, hello. Let me check out this person and see if they have any socials. And then I watched like a bunch of videos. I was like, oh yeah, we read a ton of the same things. So
I would just like to say I feel like Bookopoly-thon is in itself a tongue twister. I don't think I could say that 5 times fast.
I was editing my vlog today. And it's like, hi, I'm Heather. This is, and I'm like mispronouncing it and then trying again and then like saying it. And I'm like, okay, yeah, par for the course. So let's go ahead and get started on the actual conversation, which I do just because I was so last minute. I do just have you guys's booktube channels linked. So hopefully you have other socials linked in your own videos. If not, I will go in and add it, but it's going to be after the live. So people, if you're
You can just
trying
leave
to get
mine.
it.
Booktubes, that's
Yeah,
just fine.
don't
And
worry
then
about it.
everything's linked on my videos.
Same.
Okay. All right. So the first thing, obviously, we're talking about romance assumptions, kind of general public assumptions, our own assumptions, things we hear, things we'd like to correct, all those things. Ah, shoot. I was supposed to link something else in the description, which I did not. I actually did this conversation on World Hoppers, which is a charity collab
Oh
channel.
yeah.
Did it with Jess Owens. She was like, I need ideas for romance. So I was like, here you go. And it was really cool. It's going to be a completely different conversation. So I think if people like this one, they might be interested in that one, because she actually just said, what are your assumptions about romance? What are your assumptions about romance readers? And did, like, questions on Instagram. And then we just replied to what people said. And obviously her audience and the World Hoppers audience in general is not heavy on exclusive romance readers. So it was really interesting to actually kind of directly address what they were saying. So same type topic, but very different conversation, I think. But so I was gonna link that. I didn't. It's World Hoppers. It's a charity channel. You guys should watch it. And if you do, you should watch the ads, because they donate all of the profits. So it's a good thing.
I
So
love World Hoppers.
I love World Hoppers. I love Al. I love all the peoples. I love all of them. So what were your assumptions before starting romance? And I guess, when did you start reading romance? Jackie, you can go first. We'll just
I started reading romance, I think it was my freshman year of high school. And I had read The Season by Sarah McLean and was like, this is amazing. Obviously, I need more of this. And then I picked up Nine Rules. And I think at that point I had been like, much like The Season, like reading kind of fantasy or historical fiction, or but always like had a strong female lead, you know what I mean? Or like there's often like a friend group. And so I feel like romance was just like that, but more focused on like it's still about like women doing cool shit, and then there's a romantic relationship. And so I read Nine Rules and I was like, interesting. And at that point I shared a Kindle account with my mother, and so I read this on our shared Kindle, and she had read The Season as well and was like, oh great, let's check out the next book. And she's like, oh, it's too bad there's sex in this book. And I was like, too bad.
It's a shame. All right.
What a shame. And I think I don't think I had like understood like what the romance like as a genre was, just that like, oh, I like this. And so I think I like went in largely without like opinions being influenced. I will say though, my mother had read also some like love inspired historicals, which were like the kind of I haven't read any recent ones. There are a few that are still on my Kindle. So I guess that like, I don't know, it was an interesting entree. I didn't have like a ton of assumptions going in, to be honest. I think it was more just like, oh, like what are the vibes that I enjoy? But I did immediately like, oh, we don't talk about these kind of books.
Right.
Keep that on the DL.
Right.
I don't know that I personally had a lot of assumptions going into reading romance. I knew a lot of other people in my life did. I don't generally personally make a lot of assumptions because I like to, like, I'm one of those like knowledge gatherers. Like, I need to know everything. But I do know that, like, I know people in my family had major assumptions about it, and I like definitely internalized those. Like, I knew that if I did try to like read a romance book, that it may be considered taboo in a way. But I didn't start. I liked romance aspects in the books that I read, but I didn't start reading again until like a few years back. And my friend got me into Sherilyn Kenyon. And so when she has suggested that, well, no, I had read a couple of other books recently, like random, I don't know, but she had recommended me Sherilyn Kenyon and told me what it was. And I was like, okay, this sounds really good. But it was more excitement, I guess I should say. I didn't have assumptions. I just was like, oh, I can't, like, this sounds good. But I also knew that if I tried to talk to it, like I couldn't talk about it with like other people. Does that make sense? But personally, I didn't have assumptions. I just knew that there were assumptions.
I really resonate with that of like, oh, this is something that like we don't tell people we read. Like I would go to the library and read books, but not like check them out.
Right.
Like
Right.
that's how you leave a trail. People find those.
Exactly. Or if you're a regular, the librarian wants to talk to you about everything you're checked out, and you're like,
Dangerous.
again. I know I definitely had a lot of assumptions about romance, and I think what it was I really assumed that it would be like the rom-com movies or like the Notebook type movies. So I figured I would either be dealing with a lot of secondhand embarrassment or I'd be crying. And that wasn't really what I was interested in. And I definitely thought that the sex scenes would not work for me. Like I would be cringing through them, I would feel awkward through them, and it would make the book much less enjoyable for me rather than more enjoyable. And as long as it's well written, I think that's the key here. As long as it's well written, I like my books to be steamy. That is my preference. But before I tried it, I definitely assumed that I would have so much secondhand embarrassment that I would not be having a good time, because that's definitely how I feel watching, the girl trip and like spill soda all over her crush or whatever on the TV. I'm just like, oh, why? That's terrible. Why are we doing this? I don't want to do this. I know I like books where it's like the character is better than I am at whatever, whether it's like knives or swords or being a better person or witty banter. Like I want them to be what I aspire to be. I'm like, oh, I would love to be in this world. I don't want it to be like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So I think that was my biggest assumption, that I just would not be having a good time. I also definitely assumed that they weren't as good. Like that you hear that so frequently that I just kind of was like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I wasn't on the internet at all. I wasn't in the bookish community at all. So I wasn't saying these things, but I was definitely one of those people that was like, oh yeah, I love a romance subplot in my fantasy. I would never like a romance book. And I was incredibly wrong, obviously. And I did read some really terrible ones there at the beginning, but for the most part, I do enough if I don't like it. So
I feel like whenever, I mean, I would assume this is kind of genre wide, but you first start reading a genre, you don't necessarily know like where to get your recommendations. And so like I totally have a folder on my like or collection on my Kindle that's like these are the books I started reading, and like one of them might be good, but they're all like authors that I had never heard of before, and it was like
right.
free on, I think it was like a free book, and I was like, oh, I'll check this out.
Right.
But it takes a while to kind of what's the word, orient yourself, I suppose.
Right.
I definitely resonate with that comment. I felt myself when I was reading other books, and really the thing I was enjoying most was romance subplots. But then I would go to the library and browse and not really know where to go or what to try or what to do. And like she was saying, I just didn't know, like, I didn't have any other friends that read romance. So I didn't know where to go. So I didn't really start reading it until I was given a recommendation from a friend, but I probably would have started reading it sooner if I had known where to go with it.
Right. I think that the online bookish community is interesting because you have the people that you like just for their personality. You have the people that your taste really aligns with, and you are like, okay, if they like it and it sounds good to me, I will probably also like it. Then you have all these people who are like perfectly good people, but like you don't really have the same things, so you don't really watch them or anything. Whereas if they were like your coworker, like you'd get along with them perfectly fine. But I always think it's interesting how it's harder to like people as creators, I think, than it is to just like them as people, because you have to like the type of content they're making, the way that they do it, their personality, the way they present, and ideally, at least some of the books that they're talking about. I always find that interesting. I don't know.
Huh. I wouldn't have thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense. You have to like work on a number of different levels.
Yeah. And even like, I feel like you can support a lot of people, but it's also like, but who are you clicking to watch
Mm-hmm.
on? I feel like that number, if you're like watching 3 of their videos a week, that number is probably significantly lower than your
Mm.
subscription or your mutuals or anything.
Yeah.
What do you think the general perception of romance is?
I think it's kind of changing and kind of not. I think it's been interesting to see. I feel like I am aware of more people reading now, and I don't know if that's genuinely because more people are reading or just they're talking about it on the internet, but I feel like over the last like since kind of the beginning of the pandemic when we were all kind of like, all right, well, what are we going to do now? I think people have been more present online, I think. Like I know people are all talking about like book bans because they just had their ticket sales, but like all of the major bookish events are like much more there's more people who want to go because and so I don't know if that's just that there are like people are talking about it or there's genuinely more people, but I think as people are talking about books more and engaging in online spaces, I think that there's a little bit more of the kind of um, I can't think, I want to say demystifying, but I know that that's not quite the right word. But I think that there's more kind of understanding of like, okay, this is like a genre that is doing interesting things and exploring like cool narratives versus like, oh, well, it's just like a bodice ripper. But I do think at the same time, there is still some of that like, um, there still is some unpacking to do around like boiling books down exclusively to like smut and also like um I don't know, about valuing it and not like I'm having a difficulty articulating the thought that I have.
We can come back to you. You don't have to
Yeah.
all out at once. It's
If
okay.
that makes sense. Sorry, I petered out at the end.
No, it does. It does make sense. What about you, Hannah?
This was about assumptions from the
What do you
community.
think the
Yeah.
general public assumes about romance? What do you think they view romance as? Romance books and
Um,
romance readers. It doesn't matter.
so the only ideas I have in terms of the general public, I guess, would be like friends and family of mine. And the
Mhm.
general idea has been just basically that it's like a waste of time or.
Yes, legitimacy. That's what I was thinking of.
Mhm. But also at the same time, I will say, I think that the public opinion is changing a bit. I think TikTok has a lot to do with that. I was recently talking to a bookseller at Barnes and Noble, and he was talking about how much what they carry has changed in the last couple of years because of TikTok and it being mostly romance, especially fantasy romance. And so I find that very interesting. So I think actually the public opinion of romance is changing and changing very quickly in a short period of time. And I think that's pretty interesting. But I definitely think it's been fairly negative over the past, and you can argue whether that has to do with society trying to keep women in their place or whatnot. But it is what it is. But it is changing clearly from what I see.
I will say something that I think is very interesting is, and this is tangentially connected,
Yes, Jessica.
but the way that we discuss like covers and the opinions people have about like what are good covers or what covers they would like to be seen reading with is fascinating, and I think that is connected to public perception of romance. Because some people have pretty strong opinions that like we want a discreet cover. We don't want people like we don't want it to look like we're reading what we're reading, which I think is really interesting. Um,
That's why they use their Kindle too. Like I use my Kindle because I
yes.
prefer it, but I know some people use it so people don't know what they're reading.
Well, and it's also like just funny to think about. Sorry, this is I will
What?
cut off in a second, but like cover trends are so cyclical. Like right now, it's object covers, just like the Sylvia Day object covers or Ronnie Lauren in like the early 2000s. And previously, there was like that whole era of historicals where it was like a house on the cover, then a random landscape. So like it's interesting to see those reinvented in a sense. But bit of an aside.
Right. This is actually a lot of what I was going to say. I think that as the online book community has grown, also the online romance reader community has grown, and having people to talk to, not only to get recommendations, but to normalize it and desensitize you to the weirdness of talking about like kinks or sex with other people, because these just aren't conversations that we have in everyday life. They're just not. You're not randomly going to be talking about how, yes, push me up against the wall and choke me. Like, that's just not a thing that shows up a lot unless you're talking about romance books. And then it's like such a normal topic to talk about because it's like, yeah, no, I love that scene all the time. And I think the more people have talked about it, the more people are like, oh, I can do that too. I like that too. That sounds amazing. And I think that the biggest part of romance being more legitimate is the online bookish space, and just the fact that you can talk to more people than just the people that you live within 10 minutes walking distance of. So, you know, my real life circle, I talk to my sister about books, but besides that, she's still the only person that's local to me that I talk to about it. But I have so many online friends that live everywhere, and we are talking about it constantly, giving each other recommendations constantly. We're all content creators, and that's just an entire world that wouldn't have existed 30 years ago for me, you know?
I think based, like, kind of jumping off that, so many people that I talk to who read romance, they like have that story of like, I started reading on my own. There was no one I could talk to about it, or like other like reader friends. I think sometimes like there are other people who I would talk to about books, but like specifically romance. I think um, like there wasn't that sense of like, oh, let me tell you about the books that I'm reading, because there was this perception of like people will judge me or think that it's weird. And then like when you enter like bookish spaces online, whether that's like booktube or Instagram or TikTok now, there was a sense of like, oh my god, there's so many other people who want to talk about these books that I like and have interesting perspectives and insights that I would never have had, which is kind of like a really fun moment to experience, even if it's like someone else that you're like, oh well, I know a book that is just like the one that you just read, so let me recommend it to you.
Right.
I will say, oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead.
I'll say, jumping off of that too, I would say through normalizing conversations about romance in booktube, I've been able to then be super confident talking about it to people in real life. Because I had started a book club, a local book club,
Oh,
and we
cool.
read thrillers. But in that, during book club conversations, I've talked to other people about romance books and like been able to bring it up super confidently and like, yeah, I read this. Like it's literature just like any other fiction. It's not real. And been super confident about it because I've had so many conversations with people online at this point about it, right?
Totally.
So it's
Helps to
created that
realize,
normalization in real life as well.
right. I think it really helps to realize that other people, when you get like the mindset shift to, well, if you don't like it, that's your problem. You don't know enough about it yet, rather than being ashamed or feeling bad. Like, they can't make you feel bad about it because you don't feel bad about it. You're like, all right, so maybe you don't know what you're missing, or maybe it's just not for you, but like it is for me. So I definitely do think that TikTok has helped. And the biggest thing about TikTok, and I did not come up with this, right? I definitely got this from like,
Right.
my name is Marinez and all of that. TikTok's
yeah.
algorithm puts you in front of people who wouldn't see you otherwise. It's not that TikTokers are better than booktubers, right? It's not that BookTok is better than booktube or anything. It's that booktube, Hannah and I were actually just talking about this, and it was about honest fiction. I had never seen her before, right? And it's like YouTube knows that you have mutuals, knows that you talk about the same thing, knows that you watch the same videos, and still never shows you each other. Like, you don't know that channels like yours exist because the algorithm is not good. It doesn't show you things that you're interested in. Whereas TikTok, it is so specific to you. As soon as you're swiping, it knows what you like, and it's showing you more people that do that.
I love the number of people who like realized like my For You page knew that I was queer before I knew I was queer, or like
Oh,
my For You page knew that I had ADHD before I knew. Like that
I know.
whole aspect, fascinating.
My For You page was all like lesbian thirst traps very quickly, and I was like,
What are you trying to say here?
I was, yeah, it's something, all right. And yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
I on that as well about like being more confident. I have a specific memory of in college, like after I like had like found romance community and was like more confident. There was some like dude bro who was like complaining about the fact at like a movie night that we had put on like it was like a Christmas time and someone had put on like a Christmas like rom-com and someone like said something derogatory. I was like, why do you have a problem with that? What do you think's wrong
Right.
with it? And just like totally like made him be like, well, and I was like, maybe think about your prejudices, or like, I didn't think, but like
The
some moment like that, and afterwards I was like, yeah,
the tactic of what do you mean by that is so good. Like you don't have to come up with a rebuttal. Just like what are you trying to say? What are you saying? It's good stuff. It works for racists. It works for all sorts of things. Yes, I do think that the general perception of romance is still not great. Like, you take the world population, you take the people who have grown to appreciating romance because of the internet, and it's not most people. It's still a pretty small percentage. But I do think that we're making so much progress that wouldn't exist without our online bookish communities. But I think it's still pretty bad. And I think that the perception of romance readers is also still pretty bad. I think they think that they're either desperate housewives or it's mommy porn, or they think that you like that because you're not smart enough to understand better books. And I think that people, one, I think people really confuse and conflate the idea that easy reading means easy writing. Just because it's like
mm.
easy to read, it was a skill to get you there. Have you ever read Amateur? It's not smooth. It's not easy reading. So I think that people are just like, oh, well, anybody could do that. And it's like, no, they absolutely could not. And also, I know that I personally, one, love romance because I love the HEA. There are so many books that I read as a kid where my character died or whatever. And if I had known that, I would have never read it. But I didn't. I don't have anybody to tell me, hey, this is what happens in this book. And there were so many instances where I was like, oh, I wish I had not read this because it's sad and I don't want to be here. And then also, I like for anxiety and all of that, I like the confidence that everything's going to be okay. I know I like my authors to have the couple be okay long before the last chapter. I like them to be okay through most of the book. Um, so I I think that being a romance reader is really truly just a preference. I like to relax in my hobby, and romance helps me do that. And it can be the opposite for you. You can read angsty, gut-wrenching romance. Like they both exist, right? But it doesn't have anything to do with this is the most complex thing I can understand. That's just not reality.
I think that the question as to whether or not a person has to justify what they read has to do with society and creating the need for the justification. And I think that that comes from, I mean, you consider women weren't allowed to vote until what, 40, 50 years ago. Before that, it was women shouldn't be reading because it's a waste of their time. So you mix reading and then the fact that women are supposed to be chaste, and it's no wonder that society doesn't want women reading about sex. I mean, it's so over, so it just becomes a matter of creating the idea that if a woman is reading this, that there's something wrong with her between the fact that she's reading and then what she's reading. I mean, you know, uh,
Right.
the question of if a woman if a woman may read in her book might be better than me, then I lose my power, kind of thing. Sorry, but
Well,
I'm just
women weren't supposed to want or enjoy sex, so obviously, then why would you want them reading about enjoying sex?
Mhm.
It really is messed up layers. What do you have an opinion, I guess, on traditionally published romance versus indie romances? And do you think that they have the same perceptions, have their own perceptions, maybe play more into the general opinion one way or another? Do you have any opinions on that?
I don't know. I feel like it might be a little bit inside ball game for outside of romance perceptions, but I definitely think that there previously has been this perception that like indie is less legitimate and like less prestigious, and in general like not as good, lower quality than trad pub. I think that that's kind of going away as like um, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion, especially since the Simon Schuster Penguin Random House trial, about like how it's like
Yeah.
harder and harder to be an author because they're they're increasing the like payout dates. So instead of like getting two payouts, it's three. Now it's four. Some people even have five different payouts. And so like it's being spread out so much um and so it's just like harder and harder to be an author without being independently wealthy or having like a partner who's
Right.
and so I think that like authors are finding it easier in some ways to try, or it's like an easier kind of, there's less barrier to entry, and as that becomes more available, I think people realize that this like um, attitude of it like being less legitimate is classist. um, I also think that like that makes sense because it's more accessible, so like people who wouldn't be able otherwise to like traditionally publish, like people who are disabled, people who are like, again, not independently wealthy, and often you'll find like more diversity of stories, like again, like authors and main characters who are disabled or who are queer or who are people of color. Like this, it's just more. Um, they're doing more and they're doing it sooner than traditionally published books are.
Right.
But
I
I
would
think that's
say,
kind of insider baseball. I don't know if like people outside of romance would like be as aware of some of that like dynamic.
Yeah.
I would say, I have personal assumptions. I would say about not. I don't know if I would call them assumptions, but in general, when I think of traditionally published romance, I think of problematic in a different way for a lot of
Mm,
things. And so I consider a lot of like self pub romance to be, there's a lot of those dark romances, right?
Mm.
Super problematic stuff that is just so over the top and so fiction, right? But the problematic things that you see in traditionally published romances are brought up in contemporary settings and brushed off and normalized, but in
mm,
a very real life setting, right? So
mm.
it's kind of different. So I do not read a lot of, mostly any barely traditionally published romance because, yeah, it's put in a real life situation oftentimes. There's a lot of those contemporary rom-coms, you know what I'm saying? And they're often problematic, but they play it
What
off
do you mean by
as
problematic? I'm just curious.
problematic in terms of like the relationships, like the dynamics, like the way
Okay, yeah.
characters treat each other. The
Hmm.
scenarios are often like
I
low key, like abusive, but played
right.
off as not so much.
Like I know for me, I would much rather read about a mafia boss kidnapping his bride than a professor like blackmailing their student into sleeping with them, you know? Like technically they're both
Oh,
taboo, but one I feel like
yeah.
is too much real life ick for me, and one is more like this isn't happening and ending in an HEA, but I'm here.
Well, what I mean more specifically, like just certain scenarios, like just breakings of trust and certain things in
Hmm.
relationships are just super problematic actions, like someone like invading someone's privacy or something like that, for example, that would happen in a not so healthy relationship, right? but happen oftentimes in traditionally published rom-coms, but are often kind of like glazed over, and like no apologies happen, and everything's just kind of like it's just kind of like glossed over kind of thing. And so that kind of thing, I feel like because it's so realistic all around everything else, it makes it seem like that's an okay way to treat someone, you know? But in something that's so obviously fictionalized, it's kind of like a different, you know, scenario.
God, I just did something.
What?
I don't know. Messed something up. Like I was like trying to click on a comment and I like right clicked or something and did the wrong thing. Okay, we're back. We're back. It's just the problem is with technology, if anything goes wrong, I don't know how to fix it. But it's okay. There was a handy little X at the top. I just did that and that helped. Um, but yeah, I agree in a lot of ways. One, I don't read a lot of traditionally published at all. Um, I just don't. And I think that part of that is one, we know how incredibly racist, prejudiced, nepotism baby publishing is, right? Like you name it, there's issues in publishing. And so I like reading diversely. That's important to me. I feel like it's the bare minimum. I feel like it's what we should be doing. So I don't read a lot of traditionally published for that because even their diverse authors, right? Let's say you have a black author writing black love, so both people are black. That still had to go through probably for traditionally published. It had to go through the agent and the editor and the team and the marketing team and the cover all these people who were not black, right? So you had to make it through. I always call it like the committee of white women. You had to get it past like this many people who don't share your identity, don't share the identity of your character, and don't understand and are not the audience that you are writing for, but you had to get through them to the audience. And so many times that gets so watered down and diluted so that it's more appealing to the masses because they're trying to sell as many copies as possible rather than I wrote this for the younger me, right? The person who knows exactly what I'm talking about without the explanation, who needs this book. The way that you're going to get it to that person is almost always indie publishing. I also feel like the main perception with indie publishing, and this plays into elitism, I have a whole thing about this. They view indie publishing as the people who were not good enough to get into traditionally publishing. It is just the failures, right? It wouldn't be anybody's choice. It wouldn't be anybody's preference. It wouldn't be anybody saying, no, I want to write the story I want to write for my reader, and this is the best way to get it to them. They don't view it as that because traditional publishing is your dream. It's we can treat you like crap. We can pay you $2,000 every year for 5 years um, because this is your dream. We're giving you, this is a privilege. This is the thing you've always wanted. You'll do anything to get it. You're welcome, rather than we are buying your content. We need your content. Your content is the entire industry. It's really not viewed that way. It's viewed as, oh, you're welcome. You got the golden ticket. You're lucky. And I feel like indie publishing is much more, I'm writing the book I want to write. For the
I would say
person I want.
too, like just to like lighten things up too a bit. I would say I feel like traditional publishing, maybe it's my own assumption of traditional publishing, but there's not enough smut. For me personally, like there's a reason that the only Katie Roberts book they've ever DNF'd was her traditionally published Neon Gods.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting. Have either of you heard of the book Asking for It by Lila Pace?
Yeah, it's on my TBR actually.
Every once in a while, I remember that was traditionally published, and I'm like,
really?
People aren't trad pubbing those books anymore.
I guess not.
That was traditionally published.
That's wild. Yeah, I have it because I did a consensual non-consent video and someone put it in the comments and was like, hey, this is a book that you might like.
One of the like
Well, and I think Sherilyn Kenyon
Good for
is
you.
traditionally published too, and her books are quite steamy. Some, and it depends on which one. Like some of them are more than others, right? But there are some of her books that are very steamy, very early on. But yeah, it feels like more so more recently.
I
There's
think we could be getting more steam in contemporaries. I think that, like, especially as a reaction to a lot of the focus, again, on TikTok of
Right.
like wanting steamy books, I think we could be getting more of that. But I definitely
Right.
feel like we went through a season where it was like a little, maybe
Mhm.
in reaction to, like, we had the whole 50 Shades,
Mhm.
like, explosion, if you will, of
Right.
a very particular kind of book. And I wonder if, like, there was a bit of a,
Pull
you
back.
know what I mean?
Yeah. I also think that traditionally published books, they have to hit the acts and the like expected storylines so on point that a lot of times you're dragging out the angst or you're having that third up breakup where it does not make sense for your characters to be doing that, but you have to do that because that's what the book is supposed to be. And I
Mhm.
think that you do get more freedom in indie with that as well. Like if your characters are communicating well and something happens in the third act, they would probably communicate well about it. And you can do that. And I don't think that traditionally published authors often have that choice.
I was
That
gonna say,
yeah.
is it just me, or do traditionally published books lean on miscommunication more?
Oh, so much,
I
so much.
haven't noticed that personally, but maybe
Because
it's something that I just didn't see that other people have
I
seen.
think it's because I hate miscommunication so much.
I
I
feel
can
like
think
there are
it depends
some
on the
like
author.
trad pub books, if it's like I buy physical copies, or some of them I receive as a, like they're gifted, but I pick up as many sapphic trad pub books as I can, because like there are many of them, and I want to like buy those, and I want to support those authors and like be like, hey, there should be more of these. But I find that unless it's like, again, like a sapphic book, or like Shanisa, Shensia, I don't, Devon and Chris plan a wedding, also sapphic, but is a black romance. And that was great. And I want to see more of those, like queer black romance from trad publishers. I want them to see that like there's a demand for it. But like outside of those like specific cases, I'm much less likely to like purchase, especially a physical book. I might get others through like the library, but um,
Right. What do you think romance does well that maybe people don't give it credit for?
Smut.
It does do it well.
Sorry.
yeah. Well, and I think even within that there can be this like perception of either A, it's only smut, so like there's no other depth to it, when like there can be like really moving, powerful stories, um, or like something can't be both really powerful and emotional and like lovely and also just like filthy in the best way, you know?
Mhm.
I think too, people don't think of romance and think of like intrigue and adventure. And I will say that a
Mm.
lot of romance books are like thrilling suspense, like action, adventure, especially like mafia romances and um I don't know, you know what I'm saying? But
Yes.
like where there is these like someone's getting kidnapped or someone's like there's a car chase or you know whatever it may be, but people don't think of that when they think of romance. They think of like the emotional, you know, drama of it all. You know what I'm saying? But there's also
Right.
can often be like an adventure plot as well that
Right.
people don't really think about.
Right. There can be a journal
I'm
plot.
reading Mafia Darling right now, and I just finished Mafia Mistress, so that's what makes me think of it.
Right. Right. Well, we have entire subgenres that are romantic suspense or romantic thriller, where if nothing plot-wise external to the couple is happening, then it's not in the right subgenre like they're supposed to be. I also think that romance does character work in a way that really doesn't get credit for a lot of times. Obviously, it depends on the author, right? Some people, some people's characters are just copy and paste. Here's your tall, dark-haired, blue-eyed love interest. Here's your feisty heroine. They butt
Are you
heads.
calling anyone out in specific right
I
now?
no, I no. It's just a very common occurrence where I'm like, oh, all right, okay. But you can also have that character type, right? And actually create depth there. And you can be so attached to the characters and the found family and the actual family and the kids and the grandparents. Like, there's so much that can be done outside of the romantic relationship as well. I know that um, most of my favorite books have this aspect where, like, I love the characters. I would be happy if the book was 300 pages longer because I just want to stay with them. I'm happy where I'm at. And I don't think that gets credit for that as much. I think that a lot of times it is viewed as miscommunication or very emotional or just like these two people who are fools in love, and that's not really, the depth that it can go. I think that it has some of the best character work of all books ever. So yeah, Chloe Lee's that's good. I like it when it does not rip my heart out. I don't like being sad.
I know a lot of people love Emily Henry, and I have yet. I read Beach Read, which I enjoyed, but it was like such a gut punch emotionally that I'm like, someday I'll read more of her books. Not today. Someday.
I'm not reading nature.
I tried Beach Read. I DNF'd it, but my stepdad passed away like six, like 9 months ago now. So I think there was that, but also I thought it was like a rom com.
Yeah,
It's
it was
It
making
not.
it.
was not. She walks in
I
that
mean,
beach house
there
with
are
like 10
aspects.
pages in with a freaking box of gin. So,
I have respect for that.
and right, but it was like,
Yeah,
oh,
I don't
this
think
is not going to be like a fun thing.
Right.
think Beach Read is a romance. I can't speak for her other books. I would say it is a contemporary book with a significant romantic plot line, but I personally would not call it a romance. I know some people really want to die on that hill. I don't think that I would call it a romance, but it was a good book, and I read it at the right time. I enjoyed it. It was very meaningful, but I'm like, I'll wait on more of those.
Yeah, that's what I get. That's what I gather from Emily Henry in general is that she is kind
Right.
of like a contemporary with a romantic element, and I don't like lit fic or just contemporary
Right.
fiction. So
Same. I like my romance books. There are exceptions, but I like my romance books to be very couple focused. Like every single page is about the couple in some way or another. I'm not interested in the flashbacks. I'm not interested in like I just if you're talking to your friend, I want you to be having like a real life friendship conversation about your new relationship you're in. Like I just
Yeah,
like
this book should not pass the Bechdel test.
it should not.
Jokes,
I
it
want
can, but I'm just
to
saying.
it is. Plus,
Yeah.
I do think
yes,
that the marketing was messed up on Beach Read because I know that it was marketed as a rom com, and then like everyone that was read it was like, "This
Not a
is
rom-com,
a
folks.
beginning book with a romance subplot."
well, also publishing has purposefully, it seems, blurred the lines between
I hate
contemporary
it so much.
chick lit and
Understand.
romance. So there's that as well that you don't really know for sure what you're picking up until I mean, that's why booktube is nice because you get to hear from other people first, but um
Right.
I
you
would
don't for
also,
sure know.
honestly, this is maybe a hill I'm willing to die on. I don't think that Rosalind Palmer Takes the Cake by Alexis Hall is strictly a romance. And I feel pretty strongly about it. There's literally not a single positive thing that happens to the heroine in the first 40% of the book, including sex with her partner at the time. And she doesn't get with the hero of the book until 83%. And I'm like, babes.
Which book was it? Because I took my
I've never
headphones
read
off
that.
and I was like, oh, duh, I can't hear.
Rosalind Palmer Takes the Cake by Alexis Hall. I
Right.
mean, Alexis
Right.
Hall is a great writer. I think that
Right.
his authorial voice is fantastic, and there's like a natural witticism and like charm and humor to his voice. But that book, I don't think it's a romance,
Yeah.
personally.
No. I agree, and I get deeply annoyed. I feel like mismarketing things is not good for anybody. Like, I'm sorry if this is melon and it tastes like strawberry. Maybe I love strawberry, but I'm weirded out. What am I tasting? You know, like it doesn't mean that the thing is bad. It means that's not what you thought you were getting.
It means
And
it was
so,
poor marketing.
yeah, it's maybe you
Honestly, for me, unmet expectations is the most egregious crime that a book can commit. Like, if you 83%, I know it's so insane to me. But yeah, if you like, sorry, I'm spilling. I know a lot of people who really love the intimacy experience by Rosie Danon, and I don't think that it's a bad book. But that book was marketed as like, ooh, taboo. She's a sex worker. He's a priest or a rabbi. Like, and like, I was like, this did not fulfill on the promise of this premise for me as it was marketed.
right.
And like, it didn't work for me. And that's not to say it isn't a great book, but like, I expected certain things because of like marketing and like the promise of the premise, and it didn't work for me. Again, not that it's a bad book, but I'm like, this is not what I want.
It's legitimate. It is. I mean, I don't know. If you think it's potato salad and it's actually like marshmallow salad, like
those cakes that
so
they're made out
up.
of like mashed potatoes. Have you seen
Yeah.
those? I'm like, I love mashed potatoes.
No candy spill. I can't do it. I don't know. So much of everything that you enjoy is your mental expectation of it and what your brain is like, this is right or oh, this is not right. And it might be good if your brain switches over, but your immediate reaction is no, 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 no. And like I feel like too with books, like we know what we want. So if we picked it up thinking it was what we wanted, then of course we're not going to enjoy it when it's not even kind of that.
Also, the heroine is essayed on page by her partner.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, it like he tries to pressure her like nothing at like, but like she runs and locks herself in a bathroom.
Yeah, those are the
Like,
types. Should be mentioned if we're gonna recommend it. Hey, what do you think romance does poorly and maybe doesn't get discussed enough? Obviously, we just talked about how the marketing lines are blurring and we don't like it. But is there anything else that you're just like, romance is not great with this?
I think it's getting better. It varies author to author, but I think that the way that romance sometimes handles like gender essentialism or like aspects of queer phobia isn't great. And I think what makes it like difficult is often there's like this response. Like, I don't know if you guys follow Chels on TikTok. They're awesome. They talk a lot about historical romance. They've got a great collection. They wear a lot of overalls and I love all of them. Anyways, but was like, Chels was like, hey, I kind of think that like romance's obsession with like big dicks is like a little bit like interesting, but like specifically like that's kind of like transphobic and like maybe let's examine that a bit. And there were a ton of people in the comments who were like, but maybe it's actually more like sexism than it's like transphobia. And like trying to like explain it to this person who like is non-binary, like, oh, actually, let me tell you why this isn't like weirdly cis focused. And there's like this immediate, I think, pushback because like romance is doing really interesting work to like challenge a lot of like like hierarchy and like misogyny. Like it's doing interesting work and often is like pushing forward, which is great. But I think sometimes when people are like, hey, we love Tessa Bailey, but maybe there's a lot of weird gender essentialism and maybe let's not do that, then there's often like a pushback of like, well, you
Right.
know, and
Yeah.
it's a
Yep.
bummer every time I see it.
Right.
I would say what I would love to see is, and what I've seen more often is like you see trigger warnings, right? But I would like to see more specifically, like, I don't know what you would call it, but like unhealthy relationship word, like something saying that, because so that there can be a I guess like a I don't know what to call it, like a difference between the books that are showing unhealthy relationships, but like trying to advertise them as healthy relationships versus books that are like, no, this is purposely a super problematic relationship and that's the story of it and the whatever of it. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that I think that romance is not as progressive as it likes to think that it is. And so anytime you do confront anything that is accepted, it's like huge backlash. And it's like, calm down. But what if we just thought about it for like a second before we reacted? Because there's so much romance is inherently feminist. Romance is by women for women, and it's like, okay, but no, like no. I do think that the fact that romance is considered a feminine pursuit and is looked at down on in the same way that most femininity is looked down on, and the fact that it is a place where women have been able to write their stories, write for each other, write female pleasure, all those things. All those things have contributed to the comfort space that is romance, right? But when you say those things, then it does completely erase all queer identities. It erases even the straight cis men who do write and read romance. And if we want to challenge toxic masculinity and the patriarchy and all of these things, then shouldn't you want them also reading romance? And shouldn't you want them represented in romance? I also do have such an issue with the perfect male specimen hero every single time. I'm like, okay, so we have all this diversity with our main character, but then our love interest is only this one type, and that's all we can find attractive. And I just think that that's kind of terrible, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. Like, I'm not a fan at all.
Well, you know what my husband said to me the other day, that I something came up and I was mentioning toxic masculinity, and my husband is a very traditionally masculine man. He's a big buff hunter, he's a veteran, like he's the
Right.
classic, whatever. And he's like, so he took it immediately as thinking like, is this saying that masculinity is toxic, right? In the
Right.
phrasing of it. And so then we talked about it a little bit, and he said, well, what about toxic femininity? And I was like, huh.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
I think that much like white privilege, the thing that the first time you hear it, you're a little bit defensive. You're like, what? Like I have had to work. I haven't had everything given to me. And it's like, no, that's not what it means. It means that this part of your life doesn't make the rest of your life harder by society.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same thing with toxic masculinity. And I think it's the same thing with conventional masculinity, right? There's nothing wrong with being into all of the traditional guy things, being the traditional guy, right? There's nothing wrong with that. What's wrong with that is that being the only acceptable option, right? Just the same way that I am married with kids, I'm a stay at home mom, all of those things are fine. I made those choices. I'm happy with those choices. I like my life. It's not a good thing if everyone has to have it, regardless of what they want, or if they don't want to have kids or any of the things. Like, the traditional option is totally fine, but it should be a choice that is acceptable amongst many. And I think that that's the work that we have to do for people's perceptions and assumptions. It's not that it's not okay to be feminine or masculine or to present in a way that is just expected. It's that that shouldn't be the only thing that's considered normal, right?
And then it's the pushing of those traditional gender norms, creating toxic actions and toxic traits in people. But it goes both
Right.
ways, for sure.
Right. And you know, it's work, I feel like, that is very gradual in your own life, right? Um, you cannot make a huge uh, oopsie, I guess, on the internet and be a new person the next week. If you are actually going to change and grow, that takes time. And maybe your change and growing happens without the big oops. I know for a fact that the person I was 5 years ago is very different from the person I am today, and that so much of my views on literally everything have changed drastically in the last 10 years or so. But it's been a little bit of a gradual thing. I think that some of those seeds were always there, right? I was always like, I don't like this. Um, so I think that a lot of things were already there, but like the growth has been happening for a long time. Even like if you just want to say reading diversely, you don't go from reading 100% white authors to reading 50% BIPOC authors and a quarter queer authors, and you have, disabled and nerd. You don't do that switch in one reading month and one reading wrap up. Your reading 2 years from now should be more diverse than it is right now. If you are starting at ground zero, that's okay. It's okay because our entire society, publishing, all the things have set you up to hear the white cis straight romances. Here you go. Um, so it's okay if that's where you're at, right? Add in one, add in two. Start finding your favorite authors that are diverse in all of the areas. Start finding your favorite book recommenders who recommend diversely, who have the same taste that you do, but who already have authors that they love. And start getting those recommendations and reading those recommendations. It should be a gradual thing, but it should be progress that is measurable, that you can see. Okay, yeah, your videos from 3 years ago, not a lot of diversity. Your videos now are a lot more diverse. I think that that's true for all of the progress that we're trying to make, whether for ourselves or for our family or community.
Yeah, that's so true. Like, I think there's an expectation of like perfection almost, and like you don't have to be perfect. You just have to like do your best and like leave space for like you to mess up because you will. But like as long as you're right, like you have something measurable, like you're making strides. I think that that's like really important.
Also, I think that not pretending like you know all the things that you don't know yet is a good way to not get yourself in hot water. Like, you don't have to comment on everything. Sometimes you can just sit back and watch. And maybe if you had jumped in right away, you would have said the wrong thing. But, that's not your place. That's not your thing. You don't know the thing. So, yeah, of course you have an opinion. We all have opinions, even though we've literally never heard of this thing before. We're like, oh, no, for sure, this one. But maybe just don't. maybe just wait a little bit. And
well, I feel like it's always a good practice to like sit and listen and then respond, because maybe you have something that's important to voice, but also maybe that time will tell you that not your rodeo.
Right. Real quick, Hannah, if Jackie's leaving, do you want to stay on or do you want to be all done with the live?
We can finish up. I think you had like a few more questions.
Yeah, I can always cut it off though. I'm just giving you your choice. Okay. Well, Jackie has to leave, unfortunately, but I was very happy that you said yes because
I'm so happy to be here.
I
Thank you for
really wanted to
inviting
talk
me.
to you.
It's nice to see you.
So thank
It was nice
you.
to see you too.
Bye. Yes, she had a family thing, which is totally understandable. Um, what is my next point? What do you think there are assumptions about the romance community?
I don't really know for that one because I've been mostly just learning like
Mhm.
about the genre and like all the different kinds of romance. So like I've just kind of been soaking up the different opinions, I would say.
Mhm.
Um so
I agree.
yeah, I actually don't know. I'd like to hear some though.
Um, well, I think that a lot of people assume that, I don't know, I think a lot of people either assume that the romance community is very welcoming or very catty. And I don't think that's true either way. I think it depends on you and the people you interact with, right? It's just like every other part of life, every other part of society. And there's some people that you get along with. There's some people that you don't. There's some people your reading taste is spot on. There's some people it's the opposite, or just like you're not getting any new recommendations from them, or whatever it might be. Whatever makes it where you're like, oh, I don't know, whatever. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that that's perfectly fine. I also think that you do kind of fall into camps of um, diversity is important and diversity is not important. And I think that those groups often don't mingle super much. I think that that's always interesting. I always do find it interesting when I watch people with opposite opinions and see like the same commenters in both of their videos. I always find that interesting. But I think the romance community, I do think that we're heavily white women dominated. I think that that is true, but I think that we're making progress in, I don't want to say like more and more. I think that you have creators who talk about issues and talk about diversity and talk about and call out things, and then you have other creators who do not. And I think that that's more the line, I guess. I don't know.
I think that yeah, I don't really know. I haven't really considered that much. I do try to read diversely, but I because I read and look at a lot of the people I watch read like a lot of like fantasy romance where it's more like, for example, like I mean, does like a gargoyle have a race? You know what I'm saying?
Right, right.
I you know so I,
I think the thing with that is, though, you can read a gargoyle romance from a BIPOC author.
right
I
for
think,
sure. Oh
or
yeah.
with a BIPOC main character. I think a
Hmm.
lot of times that's like more my question, you know,
Hmm.
because like you can read all alien romance all the time if that's what you're into. There's nothing wrong with that. But there are BIPOC and queer and there's all the authors are there's ones that are writing alien romance. Like you can read diversely in whatever thing you like reading, and I think that
Hmm.
that's a important thing. Um,
I like the comment too about the like why choose romances or reverse harem or
yeah,
whatever. And I mean, obviously, the phrase reverse harem is problematic, but like everyone has to use it kind of because like or not has to, but because it's the most like everyone will know what you mean when you say it. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
yes,
But
I do think that Why Choose is a good option
White
for
Shoes
it.
is a good option, yeah,
This,
but not everyone
yeah,
knows what that means yet, kind of thing. You know what I'm
right.
saying?
Yeah, it's in the transition stage for sure.
Right.
I know a lot of people were like, just call it polyamorous. And I'm like, no, don't. Because then people who are searching for polyamorous romances where everybody's involved with everybody else, or it's anything other than four guys and one girl, right? Aren't going to be able to find their books because all the results will be why choose, right? So I think it really needs to have its own definition because otherwise they do just get mixed in because it is much more a subgenre than a real life what am I saying, relationship relationship dynamic, right? If it happens in real life it doesn't happen frequently, whereas
Right.
a lot of others do, right? Not everyone is monogamous.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, Ray answered. It's Black, Indigenous, and people of color.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an acronym.
Mm-hmm.
I specifically use it when I'm talking about not just a Black author or not just an Asian author or, when I'm talking in general about people who are not white, that's when I use it. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
talking about someone specific, then I will specifically
Right.
talk about them.
Right.
So that's what I use it for.
Because it
Um,
also encompasses like Indigenous.
right, right. How do you feel the community plays into stereotypes or maybe subverts them?
I think there is like positives and negatives. I mean, I think that I really there are things I guess I would say that I think the community is doing really well with, like getting authors to put, for example, like more like trigger warnings and things like in their books,
Right.
and talking more about like whether or not a romance is problematic. And then I think too, there is becoming more of the discussion of trying to read more BIPOC authors or like authors that are LGBTQIA um, or have that representation in their books or whatnot. So in general, I think positive. But I mean, you're always going to have situations where like anyone can have a foot and mouth moment. Anyone can have a moment, or I mean, everyone is from different backgrounds, right? So you're gonna have negative moments, but I think in general there's positives happening that are having a positive influence on the romance writer community in general.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I feel like we're moving in a good direction, as slow as it might be, and also you're moving in a good direction, and also you have people who have been writing that for years, right? It's always existed. It's just becoming more the public realm that we're actually finding these books again because of the internet and because of the online bookish community. Um,
And I think too, there's been a lot of big movement on like not kink shaming too, and I
yes.
think that's really cool.
Yeah.
Just the general like all these things that maybe people would have, oh, that's weird or whatnot. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like someone can now easily say like, okay, well, I don't like that, but that's just me personally, and
Right.
that's. But if you like this or you like this in your books, you might like it. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yes. Um, and I also think it's cool because, again, it's a way to find what works for you. And it's also a way to find that what works for you has a name that you can search for and find more of and find more of what you like. But I know, like, there's been a ton of things that I'm like, oh, am I into this? Yeah, yeah, I am actually. Yeah, this works for me. That like I wouldn't have been able to discover without romances. And also, I know there's so many things that are just not feasible in real life. That's like, oh, this is great. I love
Right.
reading this. Yeah, I agree, Steph. I think that
The more the
for me,
conversations happen, the more positivity like the more things can move in a more positive way. You can't have movement until conversations start to happen, right?
I also think there's nothing wrong with being called out. Like again, just calm down, take a step back. So much of what I base my viewpoint of people on is their reaction to being told that, hey, you shouldn't do this. And when they get mad and double down and start blocking all the people calling them out and stuff, I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't a great reaction. But if you are like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know, I will fix that, then like, okay, great, great. Like,
Is
I
this
think
like a
that's
specific like hmm? Is this
that's the
like a
type of dynamic.
oh
A
like
specific
if you
off.
comment on someone and then like on a video?
No, 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 no. I mean more like, um, I mean you could, but that's not really what I'm talking about. I was talking more about like someone messes up, either an author or a creator, and the people who are in the community that it what affected, they're like, hey, not great, not
Oh, okay.
cool. And then you can either fix it and respond well, or you can deny, get angry, block
Right.
everyone who's pointing out that, hey, that was racist. And then I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, great.
Yeah, recently there was a book, but I can't remember the author's name. But it's called Tentacles and Teeth, and it just came out, and it's I really want to read it, but when I had downloaded it to read it, I was talking about it on a vlog because I downloaded it, and the day it came out, I guess some readers had a problem with a scene, and so she immediately removed it from Kindle, rewrote that scene, apologized, and then released it again. So
Right,
I'm gonna re-download it because I think she dealt with it well. It was just like
right,
some kind of in a conversation, the way something was said or something like that,
right,
and it was not purposeful at all. And it was
right.
fixed immediately, and I think that was dealt
Exactly.
with correctly. I just so yeah, that was
Again, like
the way you should deal with it.
we cannot ask perfection of everyone.
No.
I'm going to mess up. I know that I have said things on my channel that I had to be like, actually, found out not so good. Like I've done that, right? But I don't ignore and then like keep doing it.
Right.
Like just it's not that hard. It's not that hard to be like, oh, my bad. And you know what? It's harder when you have created content and you have to go in and edit that content and then get it through. Like that is a lot of work, but that is like the correct way to handle it. That's
Right.
what
Mm-hmm.
we want from you. No one's asking for every author who ever made a mistake to never have a career again. We're asking you to change the issue and not do it again.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, a lot of people are not willing to do that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of readers and viewers who are a-okay with that and will read it and buy it and talk about it and promote it anyways because they don't care either. So it's always interesting to see the oil and water mixing where it's like people getting mad that their author was called out and people that are like, we don't hate
Yeah.
your author, we
Yeah.
just want it fixed, that's it. So
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that they just yeah.
all the
That's on like
people
all walks, right? Like, oh, I should be able to say whatever I want, and so should they, even though
pe-
it's
people
not
are
the
always
right thing to say.
problem.
It's only yeah.
If you could correct one thing about romances in the public consciousness, if you could like instantly be like, okay, everyone knows this, what would
Man,
it
if I
be?
could just fix society with a snap of my fingers. Um because the thing is it goes so deep, right? Because it is a branch of a deeper issue.
Hmm.
So I just to me it's you have to go back to the problem from the start.
Right.
You can't, because otherwise it's just gonna keep replaying itself, right? So I mean, to me it's a deeper issue. It really goes back. I mean, I majored in international relations. I studied politics in college, and so I have a lot of interest and passion in those social issues, right? So to me, it's it goes back much farther. And so there's a lot more inner workings to the cause of the issue of why society sees romance and romance readers as an issue, why it's oogie, as my mom might say, why it's, weird or, uncouth or what, whatever. But that's not because that's just what I feel like that's just these preconceived notions based on what they've been told to think, right? Because of the
Right,
basic issues of not wanting women to read these books.
right,
But I mean, a woman might say to her daughter 80 years ago that she shouldn't have her nose in a book, even if it was, Jane Austen or, economics. Yeah.
right.
So,
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think that mine would just be that the quality is there. Like, I think if I could just easily fix something, it would be that romance is good writing. It is a good book. It is not less than. And again, also the fact that it's such a wide array of things. Like, you don't have to like Steam, you don't have to like any of the things. There are romance books that are catered to your preference on everything. But I think just that they're good books. The quality is there.
and you don't have to like romance to be okay with other people liking romance, and that tells
Right.
you the deeper issue there,
Right.
that if you have to have a problem with someone else liking something that they like, even though that person is not pressuring you to like it too, that literally is such a sign of a societal issue in itself.
Right. I know Jesse at Bow Ties and Books, we talk and they're always like they are known for not liking romance. They don't like it. They don't like it in their books. They also do not look down on people who read it. It is very much just their personal preference. They're ace. They don't like it. They don't have a good time with it. That's totally fine.
Mhm.
They do not act like I am an idiot because I love reading romance books rather than, the hard hitting and like very obscure things that they like to read. So, like, that to me is the perfect example of a creator who actively says they don't like reading romance and also does it in a way that is not all shaming the romance readers that watch them or are friends with them. Okay, last one. Where do you think romance is going and where do you think it should be headed? Do you think that they are one and the same or not really?
I guess we'll have to see what happens, because I feel like you can see the variety at Barnes and Noble, right? It's changing from TikTok in itself. It's changing from the indie publishing industry, from Kindle Unlimited. That's changing it in itself. But what will happen when it hits the peak, right? When it hits the peak, is it going to bust open and publishers all of a sudden start hiring these authors and broadening their horizons? Or when it hits its peak, is there going to be a major, media promotion that is trying to smother this,
I
broadening of books, right? Are they going to
think
try
we've
to
been
push?
going through that in societies. Like I feel like we're, we've been had a big pushback recently.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's is it like, oh, these women have gone too far, so we're going to make sure we put them back in their place? Or are we going to see, oh, this is what society wants, we'll make more money if we offer it to them? um
right,
I don't know which way it will go.
right,
I think it's building to a peak, but it's just a question as to what will happen when we get there.
right. Yeah, I definitely agree that progress is often you get here and then you get dragged back down to here and you're
It's
constantly
cyclical.
trying to push that. And I do agree that there's a strong chance that it will not continue the direction that we would like to see it go, perhaps. Um,
Though I hope otherwise.
I think that assuming that we continue to have access to indie books, that can kind of be our saving grace. But, you know, Amazon controls everything. Like there's so many things where you do take one linchpin out of it and now we can't get them, you
Right,
know?
because where do we read most of our indie books?
Right. It's almost all Amazon. I know
And
authors
and who
try
owns
to,
Amazon? A man.
right, right. Yep. I know authors try to diversify their income sources so it's not completely reliant on Amazon. But everyone will tell you that even the ones that have made progress over the years and not being so reliant on Amazon, it's still such a huge chunk. And for a lot of people, it is 100% of their income, right?
Yeah.
Um, for me, I really do feel like publishing is such a mess that like I don't know how progress can possibly be made in house. Like I just don't know because it's every position, every single part of it has issues and all of your people who are trying to make a change are either very low level or they get burned out so quickly they don't get promoted, those types of things, because it is not a good system, right? So I don't know that I really see a lot of change happening in traditional publishing. Obviously, I would love to, but I don't expect it, I guess. I really do feel like the thingy, I got no words, but the thingy is pushed by indie romances, and then traditionally publishing is just behind wherever they're at.
Well, you have to think too. It's like, okay, so then traditional publishers decided they wanted to pick up Katie Robert. Well, what did they do? They made her publish a longer book with less sex in it. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
So they're clear. Like Barnes and Noble is shelving things. Like at least at mine, I see like Hooked on there. I see,
right,
um, like Pestilence, all sorts of indie published books. But so you would think that publishing got the hint, but I honestly think they don't care because when it comes to information, it's not supply and demand. It's just
right,
not. We want information to be supply and demand, but that's just the fact of our society is that it's not. It's they control the information, they control what information gets sent out to us, and if they don't want to send it out that way, then they won't.
right. Yeah,
Sorry.
no, you're fine. It really, it's one of those things where it's like, how do we change? And it's like, oh wow, that's a very depressing conversation because the more you know, the more it's just like, there's like more issues that you didn't think about. So, it's I feel like everything, once you see it, you can't unsee it, and then you're just like, great.
Girl, that's why I started working on
Right.
politics and I quit. I was like, no. Mm-mm. Then I went to law and I was like, no. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Well, you watch people who have to deal with whatever system, but they have to deal with it on a daily basis, and the way they are just so disillusioned and just like, I guess do the best you can with what you have because
Right.
it's not good. But thank you so much for talking to me. I
I
really
had fun.
appreciate jumping on, especially since we haven't really talked all that much. So thank you for
Thank you
doing
for
it.
having me on. It was a good
It was
conversation. I
fun.
think important conversation to have.
Yeah. So I will try and edit the description in a minute. Otherwise, I'll completely forget to put the World Hoppers thing. But I think, I don't know, this could be wrong. I think if you search romance assumptions, it might come up on YouTube. But I had a lot of fun. And like I said, this was a very different conversation from that one. So I thought it complemented it well. So thank you so much, everyone, for watching, and Hannah for joining me, and Jackie. I know she had to leave, and I will have another live in a month or so. Thanks. Bye.